Maschine Masters. My name is MGTheFuture. Today I'll be going over some tips and techniques inspired by Swizz Beatz on today's What Would Swizz Beatz Do? This particular tutorial is inspired by the For the Culture battle between him and Timbaland, and it reminded me, between both of these guys, of when I got into production about 15-16 years ago. Swizz Beatz was kind of like our Metro Boomin, if you will. And when he came on the scene, a lot of people liked that style. What stands out about Swizz Beatz is everything, most of his songs that he's known for are up-tempo, and they're very energetic. And there's a few reasons for this. His older material during the Rough Riders days is between 85 and 90 beats per minute. Once we get into DMX, Get It on the Floor, and tracks for Beyonce, he starts exceeding 90 beats per minute, which is much later. So I'm going to focus on the earlier stuff. As far as drums and textures, a lot of Swizz Beatz stuff was emphasized by sampling sounds from keyboards. Because remember, back in the day, we didn't have the Maschine Masters shop. There wasn't too many public sound design companies. There was a lot of sample CDs if you knew where to find them. A lot of those drums come from a sound designer, this guy in Los Angeles. He used to make custom MPC and MV8000 covers for like RZA and a lot of celebrities. And almost everything on that drum disc are those iconic sounds we heard being used by Swizz Beatz, even some Neptunes and Timbaland to a lesser extent. So I have a Korg Triton, of course, but if you were lucky, you could find all these percussions as well. So a lot of those snares you hear in the older stuff. This you'll hear with Timbaland and Jay-Z. The most used crash ever in hip hop. And this is the sound. When I did the Polo to Don tutorial, I was describing how the snares are created. The percussion sound from that song is this. And this is where we get our Shorty Red Lex Luger chant from. Is just modified. So just from that alone, if you're interested in sound design or making your own sounds, and with our particular culture, a lot of the samples we find from producer packs, they're just being resampled from songs. Therefore, the quality and the impact is taken away. So it'd be a good idea to go on, eBay or Reverb or things like that and buy the old sound modules. And I'm gonna go through the kits I put together real quick to kind of speed through this. I call this Swizz Percussion, so these are from various sources of sounds that he has used or his signature to him during that time period. And that laser zap, we hear A-Rap Music use a lot. Korg drums, which is all samples from the Korg library. And then lastly, these are various drums. And when I was putting this particular kit together, I realized where that snare came from that he was using in I'm a Hustler. That's from the Roland Phantom. And he uses that snare a whole lot. So that's the meat and potatoes. That is the main drum sounds, the main textures. To adopt that into your own style, you want really deep sub kicks that kind of play the background a little bit, that don't pitch a whole lot. You could even use that tutorial that dropped the other day with how to create your own melodic kick. Make your own kick. The snares are usually hard. They can be analog from the 808 and layered with a clap, or they could be old school breaks, the big heavy chunky snares that they're using, and just with some low pass on it. And then the percussions, of course, all bright sounds, which we call high frequency content. A lot of hit records, they're hit records because of high frequency content. And you'll see this in discussions amongst engineers trying to figure out how to boost 10K, how to create that energy that's missing if a song doesn't have it. But in Swizz Beatz's case, all his old beats that people love have it. So here's a few patterns I put together inspired by some of his tracks, just to give you an idea of what's going on there as far as patterns go. So what's going on, what stands out within sequencing, and him being an MPC user, it sounds like he's using 4-bar patterns. So pattern A is the first 2 bars, and pattern B is the second 2 bars. And if you look at the sequencing that he does, pattern A is usually much different than pattern B as far as an extra kick. The percussion rhythm or its placement also changes, and that kind of gives you, instead of him doing syncopation like Timbaland does within 1-bar loops or 2-bar loops, he stretches his syncopation, so he has one rhythm in the beginning and a different rhythm at the end as far as the percussions and high frequency go. We kind of do that now too in trap, when I was showing you how to add a kick to a track or take the kick away to change the energy. His change of percussions does the same thing. And also the end of all his patterns, his 4th bar sequence, like this one here, there's things missing there, or here there's a whole bar missing there, and on this one as well. He's creating a timing, so like, you know, the pattern is over or the verse is going into the hook. And we used to do that a lot. A lot of Dipset beats did that at the end of those last bars, be it tom rolls or hi-hat bars, a whole bunch of different tricks that you can use, and that was like the standard arrangement that everyone used. Even Scott Storch, Dr. Dre, his 4-bar drum patterns, and the last bar usually has a switch up or a drum fill or something. And you'll notice that that's James Brown, and a lot of people use that. Just Blaze uses that, and Swizz Beatz uses it. But what's interesting about Swizz Beatz, he uses his own voice. He recreated it in his old beats. Just the mixing of it too. His kicks and his snares hit really hard, so the processing or the outboard on the MPC is vicious. This is not as a popular topic as it used to be when I was coming up, but different programs make your drums sound different, largely why I use Ableton Live. But the MPC 2500 is okay from what I've heard. The 2000 XL 2000, those jokers hit. So if you can get your hand on one of those machines, the older ones, it'll probably fare you a lot better if you want that kind of authentic old school hip hop knock on your drums. And then the last part to kind of point out is his instrumentation and melodies. I read an interview a long time ago about Swizz. He was talking about how instead of sampling records, he was sampling keyboard demos. So like the default sounds you open up on Casios, or even like on the Triton, you know, the pre-made songs, the factory songs, he chopped those melodies up and sampled them. And I don't think he ever got into any copyright problems or, you know, publishing issues with that. So a lot of his sounds are synthesizers and demos being chopped up, or, you know, riffs from sample CDs. So I'm gonna show you an example of that. Back in the day, on those old Big Fish audio CDs and those old Akai CDs, we used to have samples like this. So a lot of Swizz Beatz sounds, a lot of Timbaland's old beats too, would just be real simple patterns like this. If you find samples like that, or more importantly, if you make your own, keep in mind, if you use a chord, there's only 3 minors or 3 majors in the scale, and their spacing is very particular. So you want to kind of find the separation or the spacing of how it would be in a scale. And of course, his bass drum, it didn't pitch as much as we do with South beats. It's usually the key of the song just hitting. Another thing that I ended up doing was making my own with Omnisphere. So since I know he likes to use a lot of synthesizers and arpeggiators, I played a guitar arpeggiator and chopped it up. So this is in classic mode, warp set to beats. Voices, I set it to cut itself off so it has that choppiness. And of course you got choke groups on Maschine and Akai. And that's pretty much it. A lot of his stuff had reverb, so pay attention to that. A lot of his claps and his snares had a gated reverbs on them. And you can do that by setting your pre-delay to a 16th note or 18th note. 16th or 8th note using the BPM calculator. So that's that. That was my idea, my concept for kind of tying those things in together. One last thing I want to show you is what we would do to go about creating our own, like I did, and just kind of give you some behind the scenes of what to look out for. So this VST is going to be Omnisphere. It doesn't have to be Omnisphere. I just prefer it because it has so many different ARPs. But be careful with Omnisphere ARPs, man. The people who design these ARPs kind of like freestyled the timing of them. I guess they want you to use RMX because you could lock the grooves. But if you're not using RMX, sometimes the arpeggiators do not fall on a downbeat when they go through their whole phrase. It's hard to explain, but once you start chopping it up and it starts getting you aggravated, that's why. So that's the sound I use. So we'll try something different for this one. Epic synths. Yeah, just keep in mind you don't want to use so many notes when you record something or lay down a melody because you end up pitching it or using it as phrases. And what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and resample this. I'm going to create a new channel. It's going to be a MIDI channel. I'm going to add a simpler to it. And we can just drag it in. And because Ableton is fly, it's going to keep it in time for us. So when we loop or play with something else, if we hit the key, it's going to be in time, even if I change the tempo down to 86, which is some of his slower beats. So you can use that. You can set it up. You can even change the key of it if you don't like the key of it. But most of his stuff's in a higher register. So once you have in a higher register and you add your filter, back in the day they didn't have as many effects as we had, so you could just use a simple delay. So we could send a delay to it. And I'm just using the default Ableton sends, the reverb and delay. The mix is going to be the biggest thing, making sure your high frequency content is high enough, and of course you can mix the pink noise if you need to, that'll work. But that's pretty much it. I mean, a lot of the magic in Swizz Beatz tracks, and in order for him to win this battle, is going to boil down to sample selection, like what his riff is. His drums, it already has the bounce, that's what he does, but at the same time, that's what Timbaland does. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Hopefully they have a real battle in the same format Swizz Beatz and Just Blaze had. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I'm MGTheFuture. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them in the box below. If you're not a subscriber yet, definitely subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. If you have any ideas or concepts I should do for future videos, let us know on social media. I'm at MGTheFuture, and also follow at Maschine Masters. Hopefully you guys have a good week ahead, and some of these tips will help you with some of your new productions. Until next time, thank you for joining us.